All right, so now we'll be talking about the types of question. We'll go question by question here. And the first type of question is the gist content question. So let's see what this is about and the keywords of the questions. So it's going to test your ability to understand main idea. You will always have a question regarding the main idea of the lecture and the overall topic of the conversation. And the keywords in the questions are always going to look like this. What is the main idea? What are the speakers mainly discussing? What is the lecture mainly about? Guys, you will always have questions about this, okay? And the first tip and the first strategy, is focus on the beginning, on the opening lines of the sources. Right in the beginning, you will have it stated like, oh, today's class we will be covering the Second World War. And then they will continue. So you know that the main idea of the class is the Second World War. Another tip that is very interesting is repeated words or phrases. When you see repetition is something that is being highlighted. So this is the main topic of the lecture or the conversation. And always summarize the conversation in your own words to identify the main idea. That's why practice listening, like listening to podcasts or watching to documentaries. When you are doing that, you have to try to summarize the most important facts there, because this will help you with this type of question. Now, some important tips. Focus on always the first half a minute of the lecture and the conversation. The answer is probably there. And listen to those words that are repeated, to this information that they are always coming back. All right? If they are always coming back to a topic, this is what you have to have in mind. The second type of question that is very similar to the first one, in some books or courses you will find them together, is the gist purpose question. This one is related to the purpose of a conversation and lecture. Usually we see this more for conversations because in the conversation the student will usually have a purpose. So in the example I given about the library, why does the student go to the library? Oh, to ask about the time that the libraries are open, for example. This is the purpose of that conversation. And the question is going to look a bit like that here. Why does the student visit the professor? Or what is the purpose of the lecture? To exemplify, I don't know, or something like this. What is the speaker main goal in this conversation or in the lecture? So in a lecture, the main goal can be to explain the behavior of frogs in Amazon, for example. Some strategies to develop the skill for the gist purpose question. The first thing is listen to context clues in the introduction. For example, I need help with my assignment. This is the purpose. What is the purpose here? The student needs help with the assignment. Or today we will discuss the development of planets in the solar system. Okay, usually look for sentences like those ones here. Identify the speaker's tone to infer the purpose. So if the student is, for example, sad or angry, or if the professor is nervous about something, this might indicate the purpose of a given conversation, for example. And focus on why the conversation or lecture is happening and what is being discussed here. Some important tips are: pay attention to the beginning of the conversations and focus on the detail regarding the intentions. All right, here we're focusing on intentions. And this is a very important point here as well. The alternatives here might mislead you, or make you feel one alternative is the correct one if they are using the same word of the listening. Don't look for alternatives that are using exactly the same word of the listening for any questions, because usually they are paraphrasing, they are using different words to bring the same content. So the main focus has to be the content. All right, so that's why I'm recommending you putting yourself in the shoes of the students in the conversation or of the students in the lecture, because you will know the content and this will lead you to the correct answer. Those words here are gonna help you understanding the detail that is coming afterwards and paying more attention that this might be in your questions. And finally, be careful with distractors. Incorrect answers will have words similar to what you listened to. So remember, focus on content. So now let's see here some important tips. Take notes on specific facts, and details are often tested. And here, practice, practice, practice. Okay, the more you practice this type of question, the more you will understand what the TOEFL is looking for, and you will learn the type of detail that is more tested. For example, in history lectures, we might be tested more on dates, for example, or in literature classes, we might be asked more about literature genres. This sort of thing you will only figure out if you practice a lot. Question 4 is the function questions. In these questions, they will test your understanding of why the speaker says something specific, all right? So here they will ask, why does the professor say, and then it will usually play again for you to explain the reasoning behind that specific sentence. So let's check out in detail here. So the focus here is what the reason, right? So it might be to clarify, it might be to emphasize or give example. For this question, you have to focus on the verbs of the answers, all right? So what is the action verb that motivates that speaker to say that? Why does the professor say this? What does the student mean when they say this? So this is the kind of wording that you will find in the question here. So the strategy for this type of question is focus on context. What is said before and after the sentence that they are asking you about. This will give you clues on the main reasoning behind the speaker's attitude here. So I'll give you an example that usually I give to my students about the tone of voice. So imagine a professor saying, huh, Lisa, late again, or a professor saying, hey, Lisa, late again. Do you see that the sentence is the same, but the intonation is completely different and it's expressing totally different ideas here? So that's what you need to pay attention for this type of question. Also, think about the purpose, because you need to pay attention to those verbs, like is it to explain, to correct, to give an opinion. Those are key points for you to take into consideration in the function question. And finally, some important tips is focus on the intention and the reasoning for the speaker to be talking in that given way, and also pay extra attention to the overall tone of the whole passage, the whole conversation, or the whole lecture. Question number 5 is the attitude question that is very similar to the previous one that we talked about. This one is not testing the function of a sentence, but actually the feelings of that part of the passage. So let's check it out. What is the attitude question testing here? Your ability to identify the speaker's feelings, opinions, or attitudes about a topic. So the question is a bit like this. What is the professor's opinion about uh, behavior, for example, if it is a psychology class, about a specific type of behavior? How does the student feel about his grade if he's talking to a teacher assistant related to a grade that they didn't feel happy about? What is the speaker's attitude towards something related to that passage? Okay, and how do you go about the attitude question, the strategies? Pay attention to the tone of voice. As I said, is very similar to type of question number 4. The tone of voice will give away a lot here. And the word choice, okay? What kind of words, what kind of adjectives specifically here the speakers are using to express their feelings. Also listen to emotive language. I'm really excited about, or I'm not sure if this will work, for example. Focus on the context and how they respond to each other with their attitudes. And the main tips is the answers here are not completely black and white. So you have to focus on the emotional state of the speakers rather than the content itself. And finally, pay attention to the perspectives and manners that the speakers are talking here. Question number 6 is the organization question. This one will test your ability to understand how the lecture or the conversation is organized, the structure of this content. So let's check here in detail. What is testing your ability to understand the structure of the lecture and the conversation, and the keywords are: how does the professor organize the information about a given topic? How is the lecture structured? What method does the speaker use to explain XYZ? Okay, so here is something that you have to have organized notes so you can find it very quickly here. And how do you go about this type of question? First strategy is focus on transitioning words, okay? So first, secondly, next, consequence. This is a consequence of that. For example, the Cold War was a consequence of the results of the Second World War. So you already have an understanding of the order of the events here, for example. Pay attention to headings, main points, and also take notes of the order that the ideas are presented, and in historical passages, always pay attention to dates. So here, as I said, pay extra attention to dates when we are talking about historical facts, and take notes in the order that the facts are presented to you. Question number 7 is the connecting content type of question. This will test your ability to understand cause and effects and consequences. So let's check this in detail here. What is this testing? It's testing your ability to connect ideas in the lecture or conversation. For example, compare and contrast, cause and effect, classify information. So some of the key points, the keywords used in questions are: what is the relationship between fish and mammal in the ocean? If it is a biology class about animals in the ocean, all right? How does the professor explain the development of frogs? That I'm always bringing this example. How does the professor explains the develop of frogs in the Amazon? Or what does the professor compare this to that? Okay, so sometimes we have comparisons there. And the strategy for this type of question is to listen for words that indicate comparison, cause and effect, or classification. So, for example, in contracts, similarly, or as a result, because of this kind of connector here, we will indicate that the type of question is related to this. Okay, take notes on categories, examples, and the steps mentioned in the lecture. Sometimes the lecture will give you a guide, like a step by step to something. All right, and also in the conversation, the professor can give, for example, instructions for a student, instructions on how to develop a group project, or instructions on how to study for an exam. An important tip here is to keep track on time during the lecture to engage fully to each segment. For this type of question, you have to have an understanding of the whole passage, not just in a specific part. Now let's go to the last type of question that is very similar to a question we already saw in the reading part, and this is the inference question. What is this testing here? It's testing your overall understanding of the content and what is in between the lines, what is not completely said, but you can infer based on the content. So let's check this in detail here. It will test your ability to identify the main ideas and supporting details of a passage. So basically everything. So let's check out the keywords that you will find in this type of question here. What does the professor imply about? So if it is implied, it's not given. That's why you have to understand the conversation in the lecture. And that's why I highly, highly recommend you taking notes, focusing on the content, focusing on understanding what that lecture is about. What can be inferred about, and what will the student probably do next? This one here is for the conversation. Let's talk about some strategies on how to go about the inference type of question. So the strategies to look for clues in the tone and word choice and context. Also, you have to think about what is logically implied based on the information given in the passages. And finally, avoid answers that are too specific and not supported by the conversation or lecture. This one sometimes happens when you overthink. You cannot overthink. You cannot create a story in your mind that makes sense here. The answer is in the listening. So the answer is in your notes, okay? Even if you have previous knowledge on the topic, and that's very dangerous, even if you have previous knowledge on the topic, the answer is not in your previous knowledge, but it's in the passage that you took notes of. Very, very important in inference questions because the students have a tendency to overthink here. So pay attention to the way the speaker develops the topic. Ask yourself what he aims to accomplish, he or she, and pay attention to the listening. And this is my final tip here for all questions, all right, guys, but especially for this one. Pay attention to the listening as if you were a student taking that class or participating in that conversation. If I can give you one tip, this is the most important one. So now that we talked about the types of questions, I will go about the questions format. And the question format is combined with the types of questions. Why am I spending the time to talk about questions format? Because in the questions format, there are some tricks of the TOEFL, so I want to highlight some things here. So let's go. Okay. So what do we have to have in mind when we are talking about the question formats? We have those types of questions. The first one that we have here is the multiple choice. that everybody's used to. You have 4 options, you choose one, and that's it. Okay? And we have another one that lots of students make silly mistakes because they get confused, which is the mode select multiple choice. In this one, you have to choose 2 out of 4 questions or 3 out of 5 questions. What happens here when students are nervous and they're worried about time, they only choose 1 out of 4 or 1 out of 5 because they think it is a multiple choice. And the consequence of this is a mistake. Okay, so you need to read the questions carefully. All right, another one is complete a table. You have a table there, like let me draw here a table that says, for example, mammals, fish, and reptile. Okay, and then you have here a shark, a tiger, and an alligator. What you have to do, you have to drag the correct answer to the correct place in the table. So a tiger is a mammal, a fish is a shark is a fish, and an alligator is a reptile. Is it like that? You will put the information in the correct place on a table. Then we will have listen again and inference. This one, in this one, you will listen again to a part of the lecture or the conversation, and you will have to explain the reasoning for that specific sentence. So it will be like that. Why does the professor says, Lisa, late again? Remember the example I gave you. So is it to express anger? Is it to express irony? So for this one, you have to pay attention to the tone of voice, like, huh, Lisa, late again. That express irony. Lisa, late again. That express anger. So for this type of question, not only for the emotional state, we have this type of questions for other types, this question format for other types of question, but just so you understand that you will have to listen again to part of the lecture here and they will play for you. You don't have to click on anything in this kind of question. And finally, order of events. So you have here the events in order. I don't know, First War, Second World War, and the Cold War. And you have to put the events in order. What I want to highlight in this question format here is that we are talking about the events. What is the trick of this type of question here? Is that they, during the lecture, during the conversation, they might like do it not in the correct order. So if you didn't pay attention to the content and you just took notes, in your notes, the events are going to be in the incorrect order and they are not going to make sense logically. So let me just give you an example based on this example here of the wars. They might say, well, today is a class about wars. And we will start off talking about the latest great war, which was the Cold War. And the Cold War was a consequence of the Second World War that happened in Europe. But let's remember that the Great War, the first one, the first big war in Europe, was the one that caused all of those wars that we are discussing here in class. In your notes, the order is going to be Cold War, Second World War, and First Great War. However, the correct order is inverted. So you need to pay attention to words like this was a consequence of, this caused this, all right? And also pay attention to dates. This might happen not only with historical lectures, but also to biology, like the development of a type of animal, for example, in nature. Okay, so in this part, we will be talking about how to take notes, and I'll give you some tips. This is one of the most important parts for the listening, so pay attention. So let's go, note-taking tips. So let's talk about some key practical tips on how to take notes for the listening part. The first thing you have to have in mind is that you have to focus on key ideas. All right? Don't try to write everything down. That's not going to work and you won't have time to do that. You have to be able to write keywords that when you approach the questions, you will find the answer easily. Focus on capturing the main ideas, supporting details for the detailed questions, and the relationship between ideas. And some words are going to help you with that. And what are the words? However, therefore, for example, and so on. Those words will help you understand the relationship between the ideas here. Another nice tip is to organize your notes visually. And how are you gonna be doing this? You are gonna put like a main topic and then the details, and you will go down like in the example we have here. I'm gonna show you how I do it, but you have to find the best way to organize your ideas. But find a system for you. So a suggestion here is put the main topic first and then the first key point, the second key point. You can do it in bullet points. It's up to you on how to organize your notes here, especially for the lecture. Some other tips are using abbreviation. I think this is crucial. When you use abbreviations such as ST for student, W, and then you put a slash for with. I also like this kind of signs, like you can use a direction here, for example. You can put double direction. I sometimes use this for female student, this for male students. It's up to you. For negative, usually I do like this or this to indicate negative. You have to find out the ones that make you feel more comfortable, the type of abbreviation that you would use, and you have to understand. Remember, the paper you will use, it's gonna be throw out, all right? Throw in the garbage can. So you are not gonna be evaluated by your notes. That's very, very important for you to have in mind. Another tip is to pay attention to tone and emphasis, because remember, we have that type of question that is related to the tone of voice. So maybe you can write down like the most important factor is, or stressing this, or you can draw like smiley faces, you know, like if you feel the student is sad or the professor is angry, you know, you can find a way here to organize your tips in a way that you understand. So now I want to show you how I take my notes to suggest so you can try this way. Remember, there is no way fits all. You have to see the best way for you. But I want to share the way I always took notes, and this helped me a lot. And I scored in my last TOEFL 30 out of 30 in the listening part. So I think this can help you out. So let's see here. When we are taking notes of conversations, what I suggest to do is put the piece of paper like this here, and then for you to save some time, I suggest to draw a line here in the middle, and a line here. It doesn't have to look beautiful, okay? But it's a conversation. So let's say it's a conversation between a student and a professor. So you write here student, you write here professor. And then let's say that the student is female and the professor is male. Usually we have a female and male student and professor because of the tone of voice for you to differentiate. And then everything the student says you write in one side, and everything the professor says you write in the other side. So I'll give you an example here. The student goes there and say, "Hey professor, I hope you're doing well. I'm here to talk about my grade. I'm a bit sad." "Oh, hey Lisa. Really, you are such a good student. What happened?" "Well, I took a B minus, but I was expecting more." "Wow, that's weird. Let me check here." "Yes, please, professor." "Oh yeah, you're such a great student. Sorry, Lisa, I made a mistake. You took an A plus." "Oh, fantastic. Now I'm happy." All right, just a summary here. And why did I show you here in practice how I would write it? Because I want to highlight some things. When you divide in the middle like that, you don't have to keep writing student, professor, student, professor. And we have here a flow of the conversation. So when we give those spaces here, those empty spaces here, it's easier to find the information. And when I have some things highlighted, for example, the B minus here, or like, oh, that's weird, it's gonna be easier for you to approach the questions. So this will help you be fast when taking notes and in a very organized manner. So that's how I go about in the conversation. Let's check out how I do that in the lecture. In the lecture, I like to use the paper like this horizontally, and sometimes I divide in the middle or not. It's up to you. But the main point is I always write a title. So let's say the class is about wars. Okay, so I always write here a title in a big way, so I know what the class is all about. This will already help you with the main idea question. All right, and then I always go inside the paper, so I would, draw a line in the middle here, and I always go inside for the more detailed information. So for example, let's say they start talking about World War I, and then they talk about the countries that were part of the World War I. Then they talk about the generals. Then they talk about some specific order from a general. And then we have World War II. Then the countries, the generals. Then I don't know, Cold War. Then the countries, generals, and detailed information. What do I have here? We also have empty space. Those free spaces help a lot. So we know that here are details about the first topic. And then when we have a second topic, we go back and know some details. When we go inside, it's easier. Another thing I do to help me understand which information is related to which other information, I use errors. So when we use this, or I sometimes use squares, and then for making correlation, so let's say that the countries are correlated here. These countries are correlated to those countries, and then I do something like this. So those kind of notes help you organize your thoughts, help you understand better the lecture, so you'll be able to answer the questions more calmly and with a lot of information. But remember, when you are taking notes, check the way I wrote World War I or World War II. I didn't write the whole thing here. As you can see, I just use abbreviation that I can easily understand, just as the ST for students and PR for professor. Okay?